morning, everybody. This is day 2 of making a propeller. So this is the same Corvair propeller that we did on the last video. And the first thing I'll do is I'll take the pattern and I lay it on the block so I can mark the airfoil side and the flat side. Because when I drill the center pilot hole, which is what I'm getting ready to do, it is going to need to be drilled. I think Grandpa called it by the indexing side. So basically I need to start where I drill on the part that is going to be next to the engine flange. So for a Corvair, they are a tractor configuration, which means that the engine is in front of the pilot, and so that means that the airfoil side is going to go out, the flat side will go towards the pilot, and that means that I need to drill it from the flat side. So I always clamp it down and make sure everything is very, very flat. If it is not flat and level, then my center pilot hole will be drilled crooked, and then it's not going to set correctly on the flange. And then I also use that center pilot hole to drill the bolt pattern, which means the bolt pattern will be off as well, and also probably my tip tracking will be off in addition to that. So it took me a long time to be comfortable drilling this because there's so much writing on it and you really don't find out till the end if you've messed it up or not. So this is not something I like doing, but you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. So this one gets a 2 1/4. William Wynn, who does most of the Corvair stuff, does what he calls the gold standard prop hub, and that bolt pattern is a 2 1/4 center pilot with a 4 3/8 bolt pattern with 3/8 bolts. That is what we call an SAE 1 bolt pattern. It's very common. So that's what I'm doing here. And then, I put it on slow-mo because I think that's the coolest thing. But, so after I drill this all the way through, I will take it all apart, and then I will drill the end attachment points that go into the lathe. So how I decided where I was going to drill here is that in the first video it showed us drilling I think it's like an 1/8 inch 1/16 of an inch hole in the very center of the prop hub. So that is actually what I used to determine where I drill that hole. And then the 2 holes on the end will also be determined off of this one as well. So that's kind of how that goes. It's not very scientific or anything like that. I'm always when it comes to propellers, there's a lot of people that think that it's very, very precise, very, very, everything is just so technical and things like that. And so I feel like when I tell people that things like this, where I eyeball it to make sure that it's all still in line, I feel like I disappoint a lot of people whenever that's the answer, because they want something so much more technical than that. Same thing when it comes to profiles. They want some kind of long mathematical explanation of why I picked the profile that I picked and things like that. And I always tell people, you know, throughout the whole history of aviation, all propellers look different and they all work. So I'm afraid that when I say this stuff, people are like, really? Because I really wanted more than that. And sometimes there's just not more than that. So the holes that you saw Katrina nail in the first video is the holes that I'm going to go off of here. So I'm going to drill one right where it was, and then right where that little nail mark was. But then I am going to take a string and straight line from the hole on one tip that I did drill and line it up with the center pilot hole, and then mark where my third hole should be to make sure that all 3 of those holes are in alignment. And making sure that all 3 of those holes are in alignment is what's going to set up my vertical balance. So if I get this wrong, or if I get it off, then my vertical balance is going to be off, and it's going to cause me a lot of problems later on in the process. So also, it looks very awkward when I do all this stuff. The props aren't necessarily that heavy. They're just an odd shape for as far as dealing with them. And they're not too heavy for me or anything like that. It just looks awkward. It's just me. It's not that they're that heavy. It's just awkward. So after I get those 3 holes drilled, then I will put it into the lathe. The video angles are not very good here. The lathe is up against a wall because that's just the way the shop worked. And so you'll just have to, that's just the best I got for right now. So, first thing I do is I put the pattern in the top, and I have to have it centered, which I generally know, because I use this pattern a lot, the shims to be put in to make it level. So I'll bolt it in through the hub, and then I bolt in the tip, which you can't see because, like I said, my angle's not great. But I usually, so the tip has to be in the center there, so that when I put my prop in the bottom, I have it in the center so that the tip does not cut out at the top of my block or at the bottom of the block. I want it in the middle of my block. So that's one of the things I'm doing there. And then after I get done tightening all that up, and I tighten it a little at a time. So I'll tighten over here and I'll tighten over there, and then I check to make sure it's tight, and then I'll check to make sure it's tight again. And after I edited and watched this video, I didn't realize how many times I go back and check to see that it's all tight and that I didn't miss anything. And the reason I do that is because I have messed several up by not getting them tight. Mostly it's the tip. If I don't tighten that up, it'll flop while it's cutting, and it won't be enough that it will actually be super noticeable. It's just something I'm like, why is that acting weird? And it's like, oh, because you didn't tighten it and now your whole prop's ruined. So that's probably my most common mistake whenever I put something in the lathe like this, is not tightening the tip, and then it'll flop and mess my whole prop up. And that's another way that decorative propellers are made. So then I'm putting my block in. So I put a bushing in the center pilot hole. There's my bushing. And then it just goes in there like that. And my jaws will only adapt to a 4-inch propeller. So those are some of the restrictions that you see. Those little jaws will only open so wide, so I can actually only do a 4-inch hub thickness on a prop. Then if anything calls for more than a 4-inch hub thickness, it is something I actually go back and glue on later to build the hub up so that it'll work. So after I usually just pin the hub through, but I don't tighten it all the way. Then I'll come over and I will make sure the tip is in the center, just like we talked about, and then I'll go back and tighten the hub. And then you'll see me tighten 2 little bolts up there on the top, and that's just kind of some extra insurance to hold it in place, just kind of a double security. And Katrina is standing on a prop there, so you'll see me stop and turn around and talk to her for a minute and back and forth. So that's kind of the way it goes. I do stuff on the lathe and she does a lot of sanding, so something is generally always going on. Machines are always running. So that's also what makes it hard for me to answer the phone during the days when all these, and to stop this in the middle of what I'm doing to go answer the phone. Generally, I'll forget where I'm at and have to, and that's a lot of times how my mistakes are made too, when I stop in the middle of this process. You kind of have a flow. I put shims on the top and on the bottom. Now, I talked about making sure that the tip is in alignment, but the hub also has to be in alignment, and you'll see me have some problems with that later whenever I check it. I want to make sure that when it cuts out, I have the same amount of distance from the prop blank to the blade so that it cuts out evenly on the top and the bottom. So what I'll do is I will bring I call it the carriage over and check that. So here I'm actually just checking to make sure leading edge is up on both of them at the same time, and the trailing edge is down on both of them at the same time, to make sure that I don't have it in backwards, because I've done that too. I've only done that one like maybe twice in the last like 10-12 years that I've been doing it. So whenever I rotate it and I check and see, if you look really closely at that blade, it is actually closer on the bottom than it is right there. So in order to remedy that, I will go back and I'm going to take one of the shims out of the top and put it on the bottom to raise that blank up a little bit closer to the blade in order to make it an even distance on both sides. So it's a time-consuming process. I cut out a few minutes in this video, but mostly like me dropping things and trying to find them, I cut that part out. But other than that, this is all in real time, how it goes, how long it takes me to set one up in the lathe. So it's not horrible. Usually I guess it feels like about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on if it's a pattern I'm used to. I can do it quicker because I kind of have everything memorized. If it's a pattern I don't use very often, it can take me longer to set it all up. Also, if I'm making a huge pitch adjustment, if my pattern is pitched at say 30 and I need it to cut a 40, that's going to take me longer to set up in the lathe, depending on, things like that. This one is one that I use a lot, so I can do it pretty quickly. So here we go on this, and I think I got it the way I want it this time. But if you're picky about it on the startup, then later on in the process, this is a rough cut, I'll go back and set the pitch and then I'll do a final cut. But if I can get it really close to accurate in this step, then I generally don't have to go back and make large adjustments later on. So I always make sure that I do get as close as I can for this first cut. So then this is actually just going to be, I turn on my blowers, first thing I do, and then I come over and I turn on the lathe. And I'm just going to, I film this in real time. Some of you have said that you like watching the lathe work, so if you enjoy that, go ahead and watch the rest of the video. And for those of you that this is just too slow, then you'll probably want to click off now, because the rest of the video is just going to be this cutting. And like I said, this is going to be the rough cut. I'll cut the second side a rough cut, then I'll go back and I'll do a final cut on both sides, and then the prop will be done. So the next video is going to be cutting out the hub and sanding it and balancing it and getting the finish on it. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.